Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Jeff Flynn and I own and operate 10 mobile home parks mostly across the southeastern United States. And today I wanted to talk about a very interesting concept that is pretty unique to the mobile home park industry itself, which is the difference between tenant-owned homes and park-owned homes. So in this video, there's a couple aspects I want to get into. The first one being how we value the properties differently versus TOH versus POH. The next thing, how we manage them differently, because there is a lot of things on the back end that you have to do differently depending on which type of unit you have. And then lastly, how you cash flow and profit from them differently, because there is definitely some nuances there that are not as intuitive as you might think if you haven't done one of them before. All right, so let me clear up the terminology. So park-owned home, or POH, is a home that is owned by the park, meaning that whoever owns the community and the land also owns that house. Whereas a tenant-owned home, or a TOH, is a tenant who actually owns the physical mobile home themselves, and they're just renting the lot from the park. So if you drove by a park, you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell which is which, and it's not extremely obvious. And what I'm going to go through here in this example is how the value of the park itself changes based on how many homes you own versus don't own. So in this case, we have two parks right next to each other in the same town, identical homes, right? One has 50 brand new homes that are all owned by the tenants, and they're paying $500 a month lot rent. The other park right next door has 50 homes on it. They're charging $500 a month, and they only have one tenant who's just renting the lot, meaning this tenant owns their own house. Their other 49 tenants are renting their houses and paying $1,000 a month for rent for the house. So the park owns 49 of the houses themselves. So obviously our total rent is way higher on the second park. And what I did here for the true NOI, this is just for example's sake, but the park with just tenant-owned homes is going to be running at, I'm estimating, a 30% expense ratio. So the NOI is somewhere around $210,000. And the other park is running at about a 55% expense ratio, right? Because they're fixing a bunch of these houses. Again, now this is just for example's sake. This is taking into account the expenses on the lots themselves and the homes. So that's why it's higher. Now, the park value is the same. Now, this is probably going to upset and confuse a lot of people, but this is the reality. Those mobile homes add no value to the park itself. Now, why is this? Because those mobile homes are not structures. They're not classified as real estate by myself, by lenders, by insurance companies. They are considered personal property. It's just like owning an RV and renting it there, or a more extreme example, owning a car and having the car in the driveway of your house. Now, if that car is worth $20,000, that doesn't make your house worth $20,000 more. Maybe you could argue if that car is paying you to park there, it's generating income, and that income makes the house worth more. But the property itself does not make the mobile home park itself worth more. So you'll save a lot of confusion for yourself whenever you're underwriting a deal. If it has a lot of park-owned homes, or any at all, the best way to actually figure out the value there is to just ignore the homes, figure out the value of the park as if it had no park-owned homes. And then you can add back in the park-owned home later if you want to. Honestly, though, I'll tell you, unless they are really nice, high-quality new homes, the type you could actually get debt on, I don't give them any value, to be honest with you, even though they rent for a lot more, which is really confusing to a lot of people. So again, two parks right next to each other, they're worth the same. Even though one grosses a lot more and one nets a hell of a lot more, it still doesn't change the fact the park is worth the same. How would I look at this? I would look at this park right here. I would underwrite it exactly like you see right here. I would say, okay, it's worth this much. And then there's 49 houses. If they're brand new houses, and if they're renting for $1,000, they're probably somewhat new. If I really wanted to get the deal done, I would probably do a separate transaction to buy the homes themselves through a different entity. But no matter what, you have to understand the park is worth the lot rent, because that is real estate. Now, you might be able to find somebody who will seller finance it to you. And I will tell you as a warning, anytime you see seller financing advertised on a deal and you find out that there's a lot of park-owned homes, I could almost bet my bottom dollar that you're going to be looking at a ridiculous price, even if it seems to make sense to you. Even if the broker says, hey, it's a 12 cap, Like, wow, a 12 cap. I can't believe I found this deal on Crexy. How lucky am I? You're probably just being made a fool of, honestly, because it's not really, the park itself is not what you're paying for. And that cap rate is not really a 12% cap rate. You're paying probably a 6% cap rate for the park, and then you're paying all this money for the land. So that's why those people seller finance that typically in situations like that, so they can get the most money out of it in total, because they realize if you went to a bank and you told the bank, hey, I want to buy this park for $2.6 million, they're going to say, no problem. If let's say you took the same valuation on a cap rate basis, which I used a 8% cap rate to calculate this value here, right? I took the NOI and I divided it by an 8 cap. Let's say I did the same thing. Let's say I took this true NOI, $326,000. And again, they're not lying to you. The park owner shows you a profit and loss statement that says they made $326,000. And we put it at an 8 cap. I'll say error. Google Sheets, no, this is not the way to calculate it. No, I'm just kidding. This is a typo. $4 million. So logically, this would tell you this is a good deal. Now, here's where it gets even more confusing. Maybe it's a better cap rate. As a buyer, higher cap rate is better. Maybe we're looking at this and say, hey, I'm looking at two deals right next to each other on Crexy. One's an 8 cap, one's a 9 cap. I'm buying the 9 cap. But what you're really doing here is you are buying a mobile home park. In this case, there's a couple ways to look at it. You could either be buying a mobile home park for what's truly, let's look at it this way. If the real NOI from the land itself is this number here from the same example before, if we're paying $3.6 million for park number 2, what we're really doing is paying a 5.7% cap rate for the park, assuming we didn't place any value on the homes themselves, which if they're new homes, you probably put some value, but not as much as you think. Now, the other way to look at this is that you're paying $2.6 million for the park, and you're also paying $1 million for the homes. That's a way to look at it. And what would that equate to if you actually divided it by the number of units? We've got $1 million divided by 49 units, $20,000 per home. So if that's what you're about, that might not be a bad strategy for you. And I'll go into a little bit more of why I used to do this strategy, why I really tend not to anymore because of what it actually means when you own the property. But it's important to understand when you're looking at the values of these things, you have to separate the two things. The park is worth one thing, the home is worth the other thing. And I see people get out of the multifamily space and try to buy their first mobile home park all the time. And they're usually under contract on something like this at some point in the due diligence. And they're like, hey, I'm really having a tough time getting a bank to finance this. And it's yeah, because you're asking them to give them a loan on personal property. I'll give you the extreme example of why banks won't do this. In fact, this park 2 may actually be worth less than park number 1, even though it grosses more and cash flows more, because there's a lot of banks who lend on mobile home parks who will not lend on it if the percentage of homes owned by the park exceeds a certain amount. I think it's 20% a lot of the time. So what I mean by that is if you took both deals to banks, you'll have more banks say, I will do park number 1. I will not lend you money at park number 2. So that's another reason why you have to be really careful about these things. But here's why. Assume I'm the bank. And you wouldn't do this because you're one of my followers on my channel and you're all about making money slowly and ethically the right way. But assume you're not. Assume you're some shyster who's going to try to defraud the bank. What would you do? You'd buy this park, you'd get the loan for $3.6 million, and then you could just move the 49 homes out of there. And so now you have a 1-lot occupied park. And maybe you just take all those homes and you put them on a vacant parcel of land and you build a new mobile home park out of that. And you go to a different bank and you get a loan for that one, right? That's why the banks won't lend you money on it, because it can move. So you can get a bank to give you money on a mobile home, but it's a different type of loan. It's not your typical real estate loan. It's called a chattel loan. So it's basically like a personal loan, like a car loan almost. But again, the biggest thing you need to take away from this is that it does not add value to the park itself. Now, here's the reality. They do make more money than just a lot. Sometimes even if it rents for $1,000, it might not actually make any extra money than a lot. And I'll explain more on that in here shortly. But what's important to understand here is that sometimes you may figure out that, hey, this park owns 20 park-owned homes. So we actually do cash flow more. That's fine, but you just want to make sure that you're not paying extra for it. It should really just be icing on the cake, not something that you're coming out of pocket and getting commercial debt on. All right, so hopefully I've beaten it through your head that you do not want to pay for the park value for the home value by paying for more for the park. Again, if you want to do two separate transactions, that is okay. But if you're doing seller financing and you don't want to break it apart, but you still think it's a good enough deal, that's fine. But it's really important to understand what you're actually paying for. But now let's go into the management side of things. So what I've got here, this is just a Shutterstock picture. This is just a generic picture of a mobile home, but I like this one because this mobile home is just being delivered. So it's clearly defined where the home stops and the park begins because there's no skirting like this vinyl stuff in these other ones. But in most situations, now some parks are different, but most of the time, if I own this park, what do I actually manage as and maintain as the park owner? The land, which there's not much to manage on land. If there was a problem with the road cracking, that would be my problem to go fix it. If there was a problem, let's say this park was on septic. If there's a problem with the septic, I would fix that. If there was a problem with the water lines, I might fix that. And we can see here, this park's on underground power. So more than likely it's the city's power lines till about here. And then typically it's the tenant's power line from here to there. So in an ideal scenario, like if I bought this park the way I'd eventually want to get it to, the city water lines come in here somewhere underground, and then the city maintains those because they installed those years ago. Then there's a meter. The meter, if that breaks, that's the city's problem. On the other side of the meter, it's the tenant's responsibility if there's any water leak. So literally not even like a plumbing problem would be my problem as the park owner. Most of the time. Again, not all the time, but most of the time. Same thing, similar with the power. The only thing I would probably repair is if from where the septic starts to where it goes out into the field, that's usually my problem. But usually what I'll do is put something in my lease. If I get called out for more than one pump at that lot in 3 years, they have to cover part of the cost because it shouldn't need that. So clearly they're either doing something wrong or we get a perk test and find out that the field lines are busted or something along those lines. But again, that's it. That's why mobile home parks are awesome investments. And I, again, stress mobile home parks are awesome investments because they're extremely stable. And a lot of these small onesie twosie stuff is the tenant's problem. So in this case, if I'm just renting this person the lot, if their shingles get a little busted, that's their problem to go fix. If this shutter starts falling off, they got to go out and deal with it. If we go inside the home and there's a little squeaky floorboard, tenant's going to just fix that on their own. It's theirs. They're going to put a little glue down, nail it down, or whatever. Any issues with that, any electrical issues within the house, that's not my responsibility as a landlord. Now, if this was my house I'm renting out, this is a really nice house. This looks like a somewhat new home. You can tell it's not brand new, but this is being delivered into the park. And it seems to be a high quality home, at least the homes I'm used to. And so it would probably rent fine, right? There probably wouldn't be a whole lot, but here's the problem. If I'm just renting these lots, do I need an on-site manager? No, probably not. I just probably need someone to take and send me pictures of how things are going. I don't need an on-site maintenance guy because he's not going to be licensed to fix the septic if there's a problem. He's probably not going to be electrical and plumbing certified either. So if there are problems, I'm going to have to call a vendor anyway. So you don't need an on-site person. So it's not really as much an operation. It's more of an investment and an asset for you at that point. If I own all these houses here, you bet you know what, that you're going to have to be out there fixing all this stuff. You're probably going to need an on-site guy, which means now you need somebody who's on salary to go fix everything because you're going to have enough small little problems, I promise you, with even a small park that you constantly have to be fixing them. And it comes this constant struggle of what do you fix and what don't you? If you're trying to just rent somebody an affordable house and the floor is a little squeaky, you're going to get a maintenance request about that. That might not be a life safety issue. It might not really affect the value of the home, but if it really needs to be fixed, you either have to decide as a landlord, am I going to go out there and fix that? Or am I going to tell the tenant this is not that big an issue? And if you tell them that, now you're in the position where you're really starting to annoy them and drive them nuts. And that's when owning the park starts to become a headache and a disaster when your tenants start resenting you. But what you see here is, hey, if this tenant actually owns their house, look at these tenants. They maintain their lawn better than I could as a landlord. Landlords are not good at maintaining things at a high level of detail. They've got perfectly landscaped bushes. They take care and they take pride in their community because they are not renters. They are homeowners. They are renting their land, but the mentality of somebody who is a homeowner is much, much different than somebody's renting. Somebody's renting this house, they're going to throw parties, they're going to smash stuff. Who cares? It's not their problem.
Look at the difference. I know personally when I put away the groceries in my house versus when I was renting an apartment, I was just throwing them on the countertop. Who cares? At my house, I'm setting them down gently. That kind of stuff compounds to the point where what you really have when you own a mobile home park and the houses is you really have a really hard to manage apartment, and honestly, a really crappy apartment complex. And I don't say crappy meaning the quality is not always nice. These look like great houses. I wouldn't say this is a low quality house, but I would say it's a crappy apartment building because they're not set up the same. Every one of those units is going to be different. Whereas if you have an apartment complex, you use the same fixture. So you have a whole case of them. If you have 50 different mobile homes, which is usually what you're going to get, each faucet's going to be different. Each thing's going to be, it's going to be impossible for you to scale. And a lot of times I had to find this out the hard way. If your tub gets replaced in a mobile home, you can't just go to Lowe's and get a tub that fits. You have to get a mobile home tub because they're different. You have to get a mobile home toilet. You have to get a mobile home shower. Not all the times, but most of the time, that's what you're probably going to have to do. And it's just going to drive you insane. It's going to drive you insane with all these onesie little twosie things. I hope you can tell from my face getting red now just talking about it. I've been there, done that. Looks good on paper. As the person owning it, it sucks. Don't do it. Okay? So that's the difference there on the management side on the back end. The other thing I would tell you from managing these tenants will just up and leave. What makes a mobile home park with tenant-owned homes nice is that your tenants are there for decades because their house is there. They're not just going to pick it up one day and leave because they got a job. Maybe they will, but oftentimes they're going to sell the house and the house is going to stay there and you're just going to get notified there's going to be a new tenant. When you're renting the house, people don't care. It's not theirs. They'll just leave. I can't tell how many times I've had to get the eviction process started, try to go out and get somebody on the phone or at the door, blah, 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 only to find out they just moved and didn't tell me. And what it creates, it's not the one problem here, two problems there. It's that you now have to have a whole level of different system, even for a small amount of mobile homes that you wouldn't have to have if you're just renting the land. You can have somebody drive through this park and tell you what looks good. If you own the houses, you got to have to start having somebody go in there, inspect it, and all sorts of different stuff. So my advice, don't rent the homes. If you are, I'll have a whole separate video on my channel of how we do long-term leases to kind of sell a home, but really on the lease payment option, which is a whole separate topic I won't get into now. But the main idea here, there's a lot more to manage when you manage the home itself, and it's not as easy as an apartment complex would be. So the next thing I want to talk about is the actual profitability of managing them, because what a lot of people get sucked into, and myself, I'm guilty of this too. A couple of my first deals were all park-owned homes. The park was all park-owned homes. And my thought process, I know it's a little bit more work, understatement of the century for the record, but it's going to cash flow way better. So it's going to be a better investment for me. I was wrong. Right? It was not an investment. What I was buying was a job. So I want to show you this. This is actually one of my parks. This is my favorite park. It's the park I've paid the most money for. It's the park I probably got the best returns on, and it's the park I've done the least amount of work for. So all good things. It's just nice to begin with. Now, at this park, you see a lot of units. There's a lot of things here to maintain. What do I, as the park owner, maintain? Septic, right? If there's a problem at the electrical box that you can't really see, here's an example of one of those right here, electrical box. I'd probably replace that, but they last for 15, 20 years. The roads, right? The roads are gravel here. You can't see it. It's a pretty large park, so you can't see all of it in this picture, but there's a paved road, so probably every 20 years I'm going to have that repaved. And one of those 20 years is probably going to be next year, for the record. But again, there's not a whole lot as the park that I have to maintain. And I'm not just telling you this in theory. Literally the first 12 months of this property, I got 3 maintenance requests. It's 44 people living here, 44 separate units. I got 3 maintenance requests. I rented out my condo when I moved from Denver, Colorado to Alabama. I got 4 maintenance requests from that in a year. So literally this entire community, I got less maintenance requests than that. And I'm not telling you this as, it's some great year. I cherry picked the year. It's the first year I bought the property. So that's when the tenants who bought, the guy I bought it from owned it for 4 decades. That's when the tenants come to light and say, hey, so-and-so never fixed this. So-and-so never did this. Now, the owner of this was fabulous. He did a really good job. He took care of it. You could tell, which is why I paid so much for it. But what it comes down to is the fact that it's easy for me to manage. Like, this is truly an asset. This is an investment. And the tenants love it too, because every single one of them is a homeowner. They're proud of their community. I don't have to get on them all the time about leaving trash outside or mowing their lawns. I do a little bit here and there, but it's nowhere near the level of systems and attention I'd have to pay if I maintained every one of these houses. But let's talk about the actual cash flow behind that. If we go back to this example we talked about earlier, you're probably thinking, Jeff, I get it. I can't really find deals, though. They're hard to find. I'd rather just do one park-owned home deal and just cash flow a lot more. Because what you're going to think in your head, so I get $500, I'm getting $1,000 to rent a mobile home. This is the mistake I used to make. I'm paying whatever you're paying for the mobile home. Call that one $20,000. That's what we talked about earlier. I'm getting $1,000 for rent. Hey, I read all the Bigger Pockets book. They talk about the 1% rule. If I can pay $100,000 for a house and rent it for $1,000, that's good cash flow. If I can buy this home for $20,000 and rent it for $1,000, I'm gonna have phenomenal cash flow. That's what I thought. It can be true with really high quality units and really high quality tenants, and you pay a low price for the units. It can be a good deal. But what's really happening here is you're not renting the home for $1,000. You're renting the home for what? $500. Now, why? Because it's $500 of that you could get if you didn't own the home at all. You could just literally let somebody move their own home and get $500. So the opportunity cost of owning it is only the difference. Now, this example is pretty extreme. Normally, I don't see it quite double. The lot rent from the current owner might be low, but a lot of times, which is something in a lot of the deals I look at, you look at something more like this, where the lot rent might be currently like $425 and the home's rent for $650, right? Something like that. Because if they're used homes, they're not going to rent for as much as you think. And so really what I'm doing here is I'm renting this home for $225. That means over the course of a year, I'm only charging $2,700 to rent this house. Now, let me tell you what, one water heater goes out, there goes my profit for the year. That tenant leaves that house for 2 to 3 months, I can't refill it. My profit's gone for the year. That tenant smokes and destroys it. My profit for the next 5 years is gone. That tenant destroys it in some other way, which every month I feel like I've seen it all, and then I realize, oh no, I never would have seen that coming. That kind of stuff where the whole house is beer cans, whole profit for the year is gone. That is the number side of it. Now the headache side of that, you're really doing all this extra work to have a maintenance guy call, deal with far more, probably 20 times the amount of maintenance requests that you would if you just rented land. You've got to deal with a lot more collection issues because tenants who are renting the homes have a much higher tendency of not paying you or paying you late because A, they're paying a lot more, so it's a higher percentage of their income. Also, it's not their house, so they really don't care. And finally, you have to get on them a lot about more things. They're the ones who are not going to cut their lawn, and it's going to look like Jurassic Park when you're gone, not the person who's owning their house and taking good care of it. So that is the part I've learned, unfortunately, the hard way, but hopefully by you sitting through this video, which I don't know what's going to end up being like 30, 40 minutes, you can avoid this problem. Now, I'm not saying I would not buy a park with a lot of park-owned homes. I still do to this day. I'll have a whole separate video on the channel here soon of what I do when I buy a home with park-owned homes. And there's a lot of different strategies you can take, and there's a right way and a wrong way to do it, I think. And I've done a lot of different ways throughout the years, and I found good ways to do it. But at the end of the day, what you have to understand, I hope you take away from this video, is mobile homes are personal property. It is not real estate. And so when you're doing deals like this, you need to be very careful of what you're paying for, and you need to be very aware of what you're getting into. Oftentimes, what I have found in the 2 years I spent trying to make a park-owned home park profitable, when I just literally gave away the homes to new tenants who were just going to rent the land, and I got my lot rent at the market rate from where it was when I bought it, I actually cash flowed more. So my workload went down dramatically, my cash flow went up dramatically, the park value went up dramatically, and the tenant's satisfaction went up dramatically, which means happy wife, happy life, happy tenants, happy landlord. If your tenants like where they live, they like the fact that they own their house, they don't share walls with a neighbor, and they're in charge of their own house, you will have a much smoother life, which at the end of the day, that's why you should be investing in real estate. If you want to make a ton of money quickly, buy a laundromat, start a business, put money in options and get super risky, or buy whatever the next Bitcoin thing is that's coming out. But if you want slow, steady checks, which is what I think is the beauty of real estate, Tenant-owned homes are going to get you there quicker. I promise you. Even if it means less NOI, even if it means less cash flow, it always ends up being quicker. So again, appreciate it. Thank you for watching this whole video. If you liked it, definitely give me a like or a comment on it. Let me know what you'd like to see next, other topics. That's how I got this idea for a video. Somebody commented telling me what they'd like to learn more about. So I'm all about educating you guys to make sure that the people who get into this industry don't make the same mistakes I did, and that you learn from my mistakes on how to do it the right way, the easy way, and the quicker way. All right. Thank you guys. Bye.